Formula One is on the edge of a collapse, and it's happening right before Miami. The biggest regulation change in decades is already being questioned after just a few races. Drivers are lifting on full straights. Cars are losing speed when they should be at maximum power. And the FIA is pushing emergency rule changes to fix it. But here's the part that changes everything. The CEO of Formula One and multiple teams have just rejected those changes. This is not a small disagreement. This is a full-scale internal war between the people who control the rules, the people who control the money, and the teams fighting to win. Because if the rules change, entire advantages disappear overnight. If the rules stay, the problem stays on track. And if no one agrees, Formula One heads into Miami with a system already showing cracks. And one race away from turning its biggest innovation into its biggest mistake. At first, nobody inside Formula One wanted to call it what it was. Because saying it out loud, this early, would be too dangerous. This wasn't just another regulation change. This was the future of the sport. Years of planning. Billions invested. Manufacturers committing based on one promise. A perfect balance between combustion and electric power. Everything was supposed to work. Everything was supposed to be ready. So when the first signs appeared, they were dismissed. Drivers lifting on straights. Energy running out before the end of a lap. Cars behaving in ways that didn't match what drivers expected. At first, it sounded normal. A learning phase. A period of adjustment. Something that would disappear once teams optimized their systems. But it didn't disappear. It repeated. Race after race. Track after track. And that's when the tone changed. Because in Formula One, repetition is never random. It means something deeper is wrong. And internally, that realization came fast. Engineers started comparing data. Different teams seeing the exact same behavior. Drivers reporting the same feeling, no matter the setup. And suddenly, what looked like adaptation started to look like a limitation. Because this wasn't about being slower. This was about being restricted. Drivers no longer pushing every moment. Drivers calculating energy, managing deployment, holding back. And that changes everything. Because Formula One has always been about one thing. Maximum attack. Every corner. Every straight. No hesitation. But now, hesitation exists. And once hesitation becomes part of the system, the sport starts to feel different. Not less advanced. Not less complex. But less pure. And that's exactly what triggered the first real alarm inside the FIA. Because once a problem is visible, not just in data, but on track, felt by drivers, and noticed by fans, it stops being something you can ignore. It becomes something you have to fix. And that's when the conversation changed completely. From "this will improve" to "this might not fix itself." And that shift is where the real crisis begins. Because the moment Formula One accepted there was a problem, it walked straight into something even bigger. A conflict it couldn't control. Because fixing this system is not just about engineering. It's about power. It's about who decides what Formula One becomes next. And that's where everything starts to break. On one side, the FIA. They see a system that is too complex, too unpredictable, and starting to behave in ways that drivers can't fully trust. Energy deployment that changes mid-lap. Cars losing performance without warning. Drivers forced to think about battery levels instead of racing instinct. For them, the solution is simple. Reduce the electric impact. Make the system more stable. Bring the cars back into a window where drivers can push without hesitation. But the moment that solution appears, it collides with something much bigger. Because on the other side, there is the business of Formula One. And from that perspective, this is not just a fix. It's a risk. Because the 50-50 engine was never just about performance. It was a message. A global narrative. A promise of a new era. And that promise was sold everywhere. To manufacturers. To sponsors. To partners who invested based on that vision. So when the FIA says, we need to reduce the electric side, what the business side hears is something very different. We are about to admit this didn't work. And that is a message they are not ready to send. Not after building an entire era around it. Not after committing the sport to that identity. So instead of supporting major changes, they resist. Protect the concept. Minimize the adjustments. Keep the foundation intact at all costs. And just when this tension reaches its peak, there's a third force that makes everything even more unstable. The teams. Because while the FIA is thinking about control, and the CEO is thinking about image, teams are thinking about something much simpler. Winning. Some teams are struggling with this system. Trying to understand it. Losing performance. For them, change is a chance. A reset. A way back into the fight. But others have already figured it out. They've optimized energy deployment. They've built their entire performance around this exact complexity. And for those teams, change is not a solution. It's a threat, because it takes away what they work to build. So they push back, quietly, strategically, support small tweaks, reject major shifts, delay decisions, control the pace of change. Because every race without major changes is another race where their advantage stays intact. And now, everything is locked. The FIA pushing for real intervention. The business side protecting the long-term vision. The teams divided between those who need change and those who fear it. And right in the middle of all this is a system that continues to behave the same way every single race, which creates the most dangerous situation possible. Because when a problem is clear, but no one agrees on how to fix it, pressure doesn't disappear. It builds. And in Formula One, when pressure builds without a solution, it always leads to one thing: a breaking point. The only question now is whether that breaking point happens behind closed doors or at full speed, in front of the world. And this is where everything stops being internal and starts becoming visible. Because Formula One can manage tension behind closed doors. It can delay decisions, control narratives, shape the message. But there is one place where none of that works: the track. Because once the cars go out, nothing can be hidden. And that's exactly why Miami is not just another race. It's the moment where the truth comes out. Not in meetings, not in statements, but at full speed. Because now, everyone knows what to look for. Drivers know it. Engineers know it. Fans are starting to notice it. Those moments on the straights. That sudden lift. That loss of speed that shouldn't exist. And if it happens again, then everything changes instantly. Because at that point, it's no longer a theory. It's proof. Proof that the system is behaving exactly the same way, despite all the discussions, despite all the pressure. And once that proof is visible, there is no way to control the narrative anymore. Because Formula One doesn't just sell racing. It sells perfection, precision. The idea that every detail is understood, engineered, mastered. But when something behaves unpredictably, that illusion breaks. And once it breaks, the problem is no longer technical. It becomes reputational. Because now the questions begin. Why wasn't this fixed earlier? Why was this system approved? Who is responsible for what happens next? And those questions don't stay inside the paddock. They spread to the media, to the fans, to the partners who invested in this vision. And that's where the real pressure appears. Because fixing a technical issue is possible. Fixing a loss of confidence is much harder. And this is where every possible outcome becomes risky. If the changes were too small, Miami exposes it. If the changes were too big, the balance of the grid shifts immediately and creates new problems. If nothing changed, then the sport walks straight into a situation it can't defend. Because everyone will see it. The same behavior, the same limitations, the same system doing exactly what it was doing before. And that is the moment Formula One cannot afford. Because once a problem becomes that visible, it stops being a phase. It becomes the identity of the era. And changing that identity later becomes almost impossible without breaking everything around it. Which leads to the most important moment of all. Not the start, not the finish, but the first time something goes wrong. A sudden loss of power. A driver lifting unexpectedly. A moment that doesn't make sense. And in that exact second, everyone watching will understand the same thing. Whether Formula One is still in control, or already reacting to a system that is now controlling it. And this is where everything finally converges into the decision Formula One can't escape. Because by the time Miami happens, the sport will already have chosen its path. Not publicly, not officially, but through its actions. Through what it allowed, and what it refused to change. And that choice will define everything that follows. Because if the system behaves the same way again, if drivers are still managing instead of attacking, if those moments of hesitation keep appearing, then the conclusion becomes unavoidable. This wasn't just a difficult transition. It was a miscalculation at the core of the regulation. And that is where the real crisis begins. Not when something fails, but when something this important fails too early. Because Formula One can survive mistakes. It can adapt. It can evolve. But what it cannot easily recover from is losing confidence in its own direction. Because once that happens, every decision becomes questioned. Every change becomes political. Every solution becomes a compromise. And that's exactly the situation forming right now. Because even if changes come after Miami, even if the system is adjusted, even if the behavior improves, The damage is already done. The doubt is already there. And that doubt changes how the sport moves forward. Teams become more defensive, more protective of their advantages, less willing to agree, less willing to take risks. And that slows everything down, which is the worst possible outcome. Because Formula One depends on speed, not just on track, but in decision-making, in adaptation, in evolution. And right now, that speed is gone, replaced by hesitation, by conflict, by a system that no longer moves as one. So when you look at Miami, you're not just looking at a race, you're looking at a turning point. The moment where Formula One either proves that it can correct itself under pressure, or reveals that it is now reacting instead of leading. Because this is what everything has been building toward. Not the engine, not the rules, not even the conflict, but the question behind all of it. Does Formula One still control its own future? Or has it created something that is now forcing the sport to adapt around it? Because if it's the second one, then this isn't just a crisis. It's the beginning of a new kind of Formula One. One where the system dictates the racing, instead of the drivers. And once that shift happens, reversing it becomes the hardest challenge the sport has ever faced.